for Stan West, our third panelist, but he might be arriving a little late. He's coming from Oak Park, closer to Chicago, so he might be running into some issues as well too. So I want to welcome you to the Museum of the Grand Prairie here at Lincoln Woods Forest Preserve. My name is Patrick Kane. I'm the Public Programs and Visitor Services Coordinator here at the Museum of the Grand Prairie. And thanks for coming out today, despite the weather. I told Candy earlier, last June we scheduled a concert on Sunday, June 10th, and if you can think back, it was right around the time there was a supposed tornado on a Sunday afternoon, and we still had a concert that afternoon as well too, and there were tree branches down in the park, but we still ended up having a concert after that. So I feel like we can't schedule an event, Candy, without having Mother Nature as well.
I know.
That's right. But we are still going to have a lot of fun today, and I'm very excited to hear these stories, and these experiences as well too. So today's program is Civil Rights in Champaign County. It's the final installment in our 1968 exhibit speaker series. All year long, we have been having lectures, presentations, film screenings, books, book signings, etc. to honor the historically influential year 1968. Also a very influential year in our museum's history as well too, being that is the year that our museum opened as the Early American Museum. Last year we celebrated our 50th anniversary, and one way we chose to do so was to create an awesome exhibit titled 1968, Time for Every Purpose. So feel free to check out that exhibit out in the museum space if you haven't done so already. And it is a pretty awesome exhibit. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us as well. A few other things before we get to today's program. I wanted to let you know about a few other programs happening here at our museum in the very near future. Lastly, I wanted to give a shout out to Katie Snyder as well too. She's in the back. Katie did an awesome job. Let's give her a hand. Katie did an awesome job helping us organize this event and then also spreading the word. It's quite possible that you heard about this event because of the efforts that Katie made. So I wanted to be sure that she was acknowledged for that as well too. Today's program, let's get to today's program because you guys didn't come here to listen to me talk. You came to hear the stories of our lovely guests and panelists up here. So we have Candy Foster, Izona Burgess, and Stan West joining us for today's presentation. And what I'm going to do first is go over the general outline, the general format for today's program, and then we'll get into some questions. I'll ask them some questions, and then we'll even get to a point where the audience members can also ask some questions. So today, as I said, it's not about me. I'm going to try and do my best to keep my talking to a minimum and generally just ask questions during the panel discussion. Prior to this program, panelists were presented with a handful of questions that I emailed to them or hand-delivered as well too, so they aren't going to be put on the spot with any of the questions that I asked them today. They should have a general idea of how to respond since they've seen some of these questions. Panelists, do not feel like you have to share anything you do not want to. Only share what you are comfortable sharing. We would just love to hear about your life experiences as much as you are comfortable sharing. And then also in the efforts of respecting the other panelists in our time today, try to keep each response generally somewhere around 3 to 4 minutes in length so we can get to most of the questions, even though we might not be able to get to all of the questions today. And then near the end of the program, there will even be time for questions from the audience. So audience members, if you have any questions, please hold those until the end when we open it up for audience member questions. So first, I figured we would start just by having each panelist briefly introduce yourself. Tell us your name, the town you currently live in, if you have any family, what you do or have done for a living, maybe some hobbies, what you like to do in your spare time, etc. And we'll start with Candy.
Yes, happy to be here, first of all, and happy to see y'all. Gerald Candy Foster. A lot of people don't know about the Gerald. But I've been a resident of Urbana, I'd say, over 50 years. So with that, I spent most of my working life in some kind of municipality, like park districts and also the state highway department. Between the two, I probably did about 35, 40 years of that. So the other part of the Candy Foster thing is the music. I I probably managed to had about 5 to 6 different groups or bands in my 55 years of entertainment. And it's been quite an experience, you know, both on stage and off stage. I've had what they call the Chitlin Circuit, and clean on up to the 2000 way of doing things is quite different from stories I've experienced in the old days, you know, traveling and just the venues in general. So it's been quite an experience, and hopefully it's not over yet. I'm still in the game, but that's where I'm coming from mostly, you know, working man, a family man with kids. I raise, don't get shocked. I helped raise 11 kids.
Wow.
So that's me.
Okay, yeah. So, Izona Burgess, and first of all, I think I need to apologize because you guys were coming out here looking for prominent people in the community. I have got one of them. But anyway, yeah, no, so, yes, Izona Burgess. I live in Urbana. I have been married for 42.5 years. I got here as a result of the Project 500, University of Illinois, one of those people. I retired from the Champaign school system 6 years ago, but my retirement kind of also relates to my hobby. I have 2.5 kids, and you're probably wondering how you get a half kid. Well, the half kid is my grandchild. And so I kind of count her as like one of my own. I mean, that's what she's not officially. I didn't officially sign her birth certificate, but you know, I always call her, yeah, that she's 2.5 children, but 2 children, 1 grandchild. That's what I have. And yeah, for my spare time, I actually go back to substitute sometimes as a hobby because it makes me appreciate so much more that I'm retired. So I go into the schools, I see a lot of my old friends, and then I leave. And some of you guys here, Greg can probably attest to that because he's still over there at Centennial. I go, I don't have to deal with this. It's just for a few hours. So yeah, I do that, and then I also do a lot of volunteer work in the community, and you know, I like to learn, and so when Katie asked if I would be a part of this panel, I said, sure, why not?
Hi, I'm Stan, and like Candy, I come from a musical family, part of 3 generations of percussionists. During the day, basically I'm a reporter, because even when I was here, like Izona, part of Project 500, I was nosy. So people said I was always up in their business. So I decided to get some mad skills and get deep in their business. And I became a reporter. I cover culture, music a lot. Covered the Grammys. Tonight is the Grammys. I covered about 7 Grammys in a row. In the 80s, and I also covered conflict. I was a foreign correspondent, and I spent a lot of time reporting from 24 different regions, capitals in the globe. Mainly because I'm just nosy. I just want to find out our folks are tripping. But that's kind of it for me. And I teach at Columbia College because I'm not fortunate enough to retire. I'm not smart enough to figure out how to do that. So I'm still on the plantation.
All right. Well, we thank you, panelists, for coming out again today and for introducing yourself to us. Our first question here is we're going to delve into 1968, the late 1960s. So first one, pretty basic question. It's not really a question really, but I have some example questions. Describe to us what you were doing in 1968. So some example questions that you could answer to help describe what you were doing in 1968. Were you in school? What were you studying? Did you have a job? Where did you work at? Where did you live? How did you spend your time? Were you involved with any community or campus organizations? Were you affiliated with or influenced by the University of Illinois' Project 500 program? Any other particular experiences you would like to share with the audience today about your time in 1968? So just in general, describe to the audience what you were doing in 1968, and we'll start with Izona this time, and I believe she has some stuff she would like to show us.
Yeah, because it'll kind of help you to understand where my head was in 1968. So, yeah, so I kind of put that graphic up there. Background, family, schooling. And when we were thinking about 1968, I was kind of thinking about what formed my view of the world, my earliest memory of racial discrimination, and factors that kind of helped or shaped. And so most of us, what shapes us, of course, you know, there at the center is my family, you know, mother, father, and this like 4 of us, people are trying to figure out which girl is me. And I said it's the one with the big head. It's not the older, I'm actually the older child. And my poor brother, I don't know, I sort of cut him out of the photo, my older brother. And then this one. So even though it sort of looks in 1968, then later on there were an additional 3 who came. But these are the 4 who had the most impact on my life. So. The other 3 were, you know, much younger. So my mom almost like my mom and dad had almost like 2 sets of children. The first set, and then another 3 came, another 3 brothers. So it was just the 2 daughters. And then I'm kind of showing myself here as a student at Lindblom High School there, then in the government club. But I think that this probably will really help you to see the picture that I have of the 1964 Senior Girls Council at Lindblom, and then the 1968. I'm in the 1968 photo. I think maybe I had a yellow arrow pointed toward myself. But if you look at what the photo looked like in 1964, when I came there, Lindblom High School, you don't see a black person in that photo in 1964. And if you look at 1968, I mean, that was one of the clubs I really strived for. I really wanted to be on the Senior Girls Council. It's all black. That was pretty much my experience. So once we began to integrate the schools, all the whites fled. So that will kind of help you to think about where I was. So if you go to the next slide, just keep that image in your mind. And so I kind of put another kind of background. My parents migrated to Chicago, of course, from Arkansas to escape the Jim Crow laws. And then you can see some of the other things that I have on there about, you know, my father was one of 7, a real close extended family. My father loved automobiles, and my mom loved clothes. And I happened to marry somebody who loved both, automobiles and clothes. And so, but the reason why I say that is because it kind of shaped a lot of what I did. The automobile, being able to get around, made a huge difference. And then I think because my parents had experienced so much in the Jim Crow South, they really shielded us from a lot of experiences. I mean, I felt like it was a very, very loving situation that I grew up in. And, you know, some things I say, this discrimination, when I think about, you know, family has a real strong influence, and then school had a real influence, and of course religion. And I think about schooling, again, when I first started off, began school on the west side of Chicago, it was all black, mainly, all white teachers, but it was happy. You know, then if you got discriminated against, it was because you were misbehaving. You know, I didn't experience the other stuff until the forced integration in 1962, and you can see how that turned out. And then I also kind of thought about some different views, things that really kind of helped to shape me. 1957, for the first time, my parents went back to Arkansas, and we really almost had like a Green Book experience. Anybody who's seen the movie Green Book, we were kind of warned that there were certain places that we couldn't go. And my father accidentally went to the wrong gas station. And even as a little 5-year-old, that imprint, the way he was treated, that was kind of seared in my mind. And then we also think about, and because they were from Arkansas, the Little Rock Nine, when that occurred later on that year, 1957, that had an impact. So all of these images were kind of seared in my mind. And again, you know, once we started being forced to integrate, we were forced to leave the housing project on the west side to go help integrate the schools on the south side. And that was a very, very different experience. You know, once we got there, we were in a school where the whites didn't want us and you were treated a certain way. So that was in my mind. And my teacher did start to treat me in a respectful way until she got my record from my old school, because back then it took so long for the records. When you transferred schools in the middle of a year, it took a long time. And so by 1968, having all of those experiences, as you can see, my big question was, why do they hate us so much? You know, so even though everybody was marching and protesting for that sort of a thing, in my mind's eye, it was like, this is just really not working. But for us, I think 1968 was also the first year that we got a house. We finally moved out of the housing project in 1968. But again, that was as a result of Dr. Martin Luther King's death. So I think I kind of put in there, it was the worst of times and it was also the best of times for me. And it was really weird. I got my first job. I was working at S.S. Kresge's Five and Dime store. I was working behind the lunch counter then. So there were just a lot of things that that were going on in my mind. You know, prior to this, you know, my family had marched with Martin Luther King when he marched on Soldier Field, Freedom Sunday. We had done those kinds of things. We participated when John Kennedy was being elected president in 1960. That was the first time that my dad became a little bit politically active. He was kind of putting hope in that. And then when I look at all of the things that happened with Dr. King, with John F. Kennedy, and both of them getting assassinated, the two things that my dad had really put a lot of hope in. By the time 1968 rolled around, and after the assassination of Dr. King, I just really had some serious questions as to where we were going in the world, I think. So I think that there was the next slide. I think, I think the next, was that it? Yeah, and that's what I was saying. And then the one thing that really had a really big impact on my life were the Dick and Jane books. I don't know if anybody here had Dick and Jane, but in the Chicago public schools. So, you know, I had my family influence. Then when I started school with the Dick and Jane books and I saw those images in the book, then I started to think that, you know, there was a different life outside of, you know, the housing project. So those kinds of things. So I kind of put a few quotes on there as to that. And then I think with these quotes, I think a lot of these quotes, I did quote from Michelle Obama's book, because Michelle Obama, she was starting kindergarten just as I was leaving high school in Chicago. What I found very interesting about her book is that so many of the experiences that she went through 13 years after me were so similar to mine. And so what we keep seeing over and over is the same pattern. You know, striving and not actually being able to achieve it. So I'll stop here because some other things I can say. Some of the other questions.
So we'll go on to Stan. Stan next. Stan, describe to us what you were doing in 1968.
Legal or illegal? I was a high school student. I was a senior, not too far from 6130 South Walcott, Woodlawn. I was at South Shore High School. Similar experience to Izona in that the school was primarily white, mostly Jewish, so much so it would close on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is totally cool for a kid from a black South Side neighborhood. So I learned quite a lot, and toward the end of my tenure there, the school started to become more multicultural, which was very helpful on lots of levels and lots of layers. But like Izona mentioned, The assassination of Dr. King was a pivotal event for, I'd say, everybody throughout the nation, especially youth, because it was sort of the end of one era and the beginning of another era. The idea of peaceful, nonviolent protest action was kind of closed, and a new chapter involving a more militant Black Panther kind of protest was very much in play. My school, and I hate to admit it, but I played a part in closing down my school after Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination and organized a walkout. But oh no, we didn't stop there. We marched down the street to CBS. We closed that down. We went half a mile east. We turned out Bowen. And then we went about 2 miles southwest and we turned out Harlan, because it was that time. School was out, and we were just determined to make sure that this youthful anger was very much in play, and it had to be demonstrated as such. About around that time, I started applying to schools, and like Izona, I wound up applying to University of Illinois, and I was accepted conditionally because my test scores weren't great, my grades weren't great, but I had some skills as a storyteller, as a writer, and so I took some remedial classes in 1969. So I came out, I think, a year after you.
No, I came actually in 1969.
Okay, well, I came around the same time than you did, and so our experiences seem to mirror the same times and the same sense of protest. But there was one more thing I should mention, is that in 1969, because I practiced what I preach and what I teach, I volunteered as part of my idea of civic journalism, selling Black Panther Party papers in Inglewood on 63rd and Austin.
That's why it worked.
I thought so. The Kresge, I remember the Kresge. And about half a mile from there, I worked at the free breakfast program at a church in Inglewood where the L turns right. I think it was more or less around 60th and Lafayette, somewhere around in there. And I worked on the west side, the best side, at Spurgeon J. Quinter's free health clinic as a lab technician before it was closed. And it really informed and framed my ideas about civic journalism, storytelling, all of that. And just one more thing about 1969, I'm almost ashamed to say, is that I was majoring, I think, in graphic design, and I had a class at the University of Illinois to redesign something in everybody's kitchen. So I said, bet, I'm going for Aunt Jemima's pancake box. So I snatched that rag off the girlfriend's head. She had a big natural, and I went and got an 8x10 camera, you know, camera you have to put a cloak around your head, and I took a picture of, it was a toy machine gun. I got it like Toys R Us, and girlfriend was strapped. And I had like a little caption like, cook your own damn pancake. Well, you know, like, at that time, there wasn't the same kind of sense of humor there is now. And I got thrown out of school. They said I was fomenting violence. They thought it was a real machine gun. It was just a little toy. So I got back in and I switched my major more to journalism. That's kind of it.
All right. Kate Foster, describe to us what you were doing in 1968.
Well, mine's quite different from theirs. I'm quite older than they are. But in 68, I think one of the main things that stood out for me as an older guy was Vietnam. And Vietnam, as I was talking earlier, did a lot of things, and that affected a lot of families, black and white. And you didn't know how to take it, whether it was right or wrong, or, then you had the protesters and this, but you also had your neighbor's kid that's over there and staying. And one of the main things that came out of that, to me, was the injustice that we were doing to the kids and the soldiers themselves. I understood it, but they didn't understand it. You over there in a jungle, people shooting at you, and the last thing you want to hear is that your neighbors and friends are, booing you. So that was an embarrassing time in my life, and especially, and then they were saying that later in the war, they were wondering why, as it went through the years, more and more black soldiers were being put to the front and doing stuff that nobody else wanted to do, and all that old kind of stuff. And so you just didn't know what to believe. So I had the opportunity to put my little part in by being with a group we call Soul Brothers. Back in the day, the Soul Brothers was something. But we would play around town and all of, all up down the state. In the meantime, where I bring it up at is because of the Sloopfield Air Base, they started bringing in a lot of young soldiers at school there. That was a really big base for transition soldiers coming in and out, for the radio technicians and all that kind of stuff that they needed in the war. They were rushing them through, like they building a plane, throwing them together and sending them out. That's the way they were doing students too. And a lot of those kids they just got out of high school, they had never been away from home. And it was really a sad thing when you really got to see it firsthand. But the main thing, my part was, a lot of the students were coming to this, they had a club because the NCO club and a wings where kids, quite naturally, was more white students than it was black. So the music indicated to that, country western, this, that, kind of stuff. And finally, it had to come to an end sooner or later, it come to a head sooner or later. Black soldiers, they just say, hey, enough is enough. We can't take no more. We waiting home. You took us out of our environment. You're doing all this stuff, then you're gonna cram this other stuff in. So they got them backed up and shut some of that stuff down. They protested. And I remember that one of the main musicians at the time was Tony Zamora and Bridgewater and that. They me and somebody at the base that had some power, called to Champaign and told Tony that any kind of black bands or any kind of black musicians, find them and get them up here. so we, he called me and my group and we go up there and we play. And we was playing something like 4 or 5 nights a week between the 2 or 3 bands. And it eventually calmed them down, they really did. And actually it ended up where we was going to different bases, playing for these kids, and I went to Wright Air Force Base, over in St. Louis, went all around, went clean out the near Canada base up there playing. And what they did, it was good because they really rich out there. They would have like the, February is a day for Afro-American and whatever, Black History Week and month. And they wouldn't exactly call it that back then, but they would have on a basis like Soul Food Week. And then some bases had Soul Food Month. In other words, all of the foods that black people was used to, that's what they'd have on the menu, in the cafeterias. And that was really a big move too. And it's really calmed things down a lot. And I think that was one of my most important things that I did. But and then to lighten some of the other stuff, I did a little reading myself later on in life, and because I don't know how important it was to you, but it was important to me, exciting to me, that the first day the man walked on the moon. So that going to the moon was important. Now you say why? There's a lot of reasons why, because a lot of good things come out of that. But most important was the stuff that we didn't know until now, or we might have, some of us still don't know. There was a lot of black women that made that happen. They worked on the inside, they did the math, they did all the paperwork and the stuff. You didn't have the computers like you do now and all that. These people were very educated and very talented that made the moon shots and all the rest of NASA work. Without them, it didn't work. So when I read about some of that stuff, all of a sudden, a lot of the things that I thought was important had to take a back seat to that. Because that was a time in history where we really should have been proud of black people, especially black women. I think that they never got enough credit for that. That's what I remember about one of the things about 68.
All right, well, thank you, panelists. Paint a picture of what was going on in 1968 in your lives at that particular time. On to the next question. Choosing one or two words, how would you describe the atmosphere of the community and the United States in 1968? So if you could you choose one, maybe two words to describe the atmosphere of the community in the United States in 1968, and then also tell us why you chose that word or those couple words. And we'll start with Stan this time.
Connie Eggleston. Connie Eggleston was a black student leader in 1968 with the original Project 500 group. And she helped organize a sit-in at the student union because while 500 students were recruited and invited of color, black and Latinx, to come to University of Illinois, they were not given housing. They were not given assignments for classes, and their financial aid had not been consummated yet. And so she organized a sit-in. And to me, that story that she shared 4 months ago with the reunion of University of Illinois, but also in 1969 when the second group of us came, she shared that with us then, how many of them wound up going to jail. So it was that was sort of a raw introduction to seemingly innocuous, harmless campus life that we were suggested we would experience, but instead we got slapped in the face with the raw dog reality of discrimination. And so I remember Connie sharing that story in 1969 with us, and I remember her just 4 months ago reminding us about why we should care about that. So that's my 2 words.
We'll go to Candy next. Candy, if you could, 1 or 2 words that you would choose to describe the atmosphere of the community in the United States in 1968. How would you describe it? Choosing one of those.
it was, I don't really know the word that I would use, but I can describe how I felt and what I see. I seen in the 60s where, it's a weird thing, but I seen in the 60s where blacks had suddenly started to get educated a little bit and learn how to do without a lot of things that we strive for. We made our own way. We had, just like maybe in the community of Champaign, Danville, back then, they had their own grocery stores, they had their own dance hall, shopping places. They did a lot of things. Actually, that if you said you couldn't go down to Walgreens, well, half of them didn't want to go down there. Because they had their own little stores they went to, they worked together, the people that owned the stores or whatever, they knew the families. They, sometimes they couldn't pay for it. They give them a bill. Something unheard for now, You can go down to the grocery store, you need some milk and coffee and do whatever you, feed the kids. I say, okay, Miss Johnson, just sign that, what you got, and we'll see you on payday. These kind of things were very important back then. I mean, like I told you, I raised kids. I love my kids. I got a history with being one of those kids. So those kind of things that were very popular to me. Plus, there were organizations, black organizations also. I mean, there's like the Elks. Elkton is a big white, black, or whatever. But we had strong elk organizations in our community that they did a whole lot more than party. They raised money for you. They when we needed things at the centers, Douglas Center or in Danville Fellowship, they put money in. And sometimes we was last on the totem pole to get new chairs at the centers. We couldn't wait. These organizations like the Masons and Elks, Royal Elks Club, all black organizations, they would raise money and do for what was needed to be done in the community. So these things were so popular with me that I can always remember. That's why I became an Elk member. I became a Mason. And the thing is, and the last but not least, I can go back to these young people here and talk about when 500 program came. I was very, very happy and proud of that. I watched a lot of them come through and grow, and how they eventually blossom into doctors, lawyers, and all kinds of people, professional people. I think that was one of the most important things that I've seen done around here in a long, long time. And the other one, the last but not least, is about fraternity. Iota Phi Theta. That came out in 1968. It was one of the youngest fraternities in the country. That was a fraternity that really made a strong impact on the University of Illinois. I was born and raised at Howard University. So I ended up a part of that, and a lot of fond memories that we did a lot of computer things. We, as a fraternity, we adopted the North End, not just the street, the whole North End. We went around and did things every year. We cut the grass, we cleaned the yards, we had Thanksgiving for them. We feeded all elderly people, Easter egg hunts. We did all kind of things. But in Champaign Urbana Day, that's what they call a neighborhood get together. That means that all the kids that were born and raised in Champaign Urbana and the ones that went to school, the ones that had real ties to come back in the community. That's what that was for. We celebrated, they had barbecue and chicken and everything, and games, basketball games, and talent shows and all that stuff. These are the things that came out of the 60s and came on up, you know. That was very important in this whole area, not just Champaign, but the whole area. So.
Izona, one or two words, how would you describe the atmosphere of Champaign County community in the United States in
Slide
60?
number 5. Yeah, and I'll just describe it in 2 words, but the slide will just say, kind of, slide number 5, yeah. 1968. Yeah, so, yeah, if you look at everything that was going on, and living in Chicago, one of the big things happened to be the Democratic National Convention went on that summer, all of those things. So 2 words to describe 1968 for me, nervous breakdown. I thought I was gonna have one, and I also thought the world was having a nervous breakdown. Because these things just kept happening, one after another. I don't even know if people really remember just how close RFK's assassination happened to JFK's. And then there was another assassination that happened a couple of days, I think it was a Black Panther, right after Martin Luther King.
John Huggins and Apprentice Bucky Carter at UCLA's lunchroom.
Yeah, and I think living in Chicago, you really felt it, and I say it was the worst of times, it was the best of times, because as a result of all of these things happening, the best thing that happened, you see in bold red, July, the Johnsons moved out of public housing into a 2-flat building.
Yeah.
And we got to do that as a result of different acts that were passed, open housing in Chicago, and that was it. So I think just looking at everything on the board kind of tells you.
Thank you, panelists, for answering that question. Next question. We celebrated at the museum our 50th anniversary in 2018. Like to look back and see some similarities throughout the entire exhibit process. We saw what we thought were some similarities between 1968 and current times. And my question to you panelists is, do you recognize any similarities between 1968, the late 1960s, and today? And if so, what are they? And we'll start with Stan this time.
I've been writing about that quite a lot. I think Katie and Pat both heard me give a formal discussion about this in Urbana, talking about Project 500 and the experience here. I wrote about the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party for Ebony. I even have handouts if anybody's interested. And this year is the 50th anniversary of my high school and Izona's high school reunion. And all of these things are symbiotically linked. And it's fascinating because there was a fascist in place then, there was a fascist in place now. There was a sense of hope, kind of sort of then. There's less so now, more of a sense of hopelessness. Many of the Panthers that I interviewed for the Ebony article talked about this in more detailed terms. They talked about one was a registered nurse then and a registered nurse now, and she shared infant mortality rates and rates of poverty, housing discrimination, lots of data like that, and making the point that not much has changed structurally. Certainly, personally, maybe definitely for the members of the Project 500, there's been 25,000 members of Black and brown communities that have graduated in the last 50 years. That's That's substantive. And as Candy mentioned, many of them, including my wife, have gone on to become physicians. My wife is a psychiatrist. I'm her favorite patient. And so there has been some incremental progress. But I was here at the University of Illinois in 2013 for a reunion, and we found out that while more than 500 students were being recruited, that only 400 were being enrolled, and less than that were getting financial aid. So in other words, things had gotten worse, not better. And so I was here for a book signing, and I had to stop signing the book, and I had to put on my reporter's hat. There was a Washington Post reporter here for the same kind of, and we started gathering data because something was wrong with this picture. At that time, there was, at many of the state schools, a kind of recruiting, aggressive recruiting of Asian students, primarily from China, because many of them had great test scores, great personalities, great grades, and were well-heeled and could pay the new higher tuition, where many of the working-class black and brown students, not so much, at least in terms of paying the fees. And so while many were being admitted, they weren't being enrolled. And so there was a problem, and even up until last fall, when the group came down here, we continued this discussion, and of course the new chancellor and the vice chancellor, along with the board, were able to find ways to level the playing field somewhat with tuition, free tuition, et cetera, so that more working class people could play a part in this process of making things better. So yes, there have been some changes, certainly for maybe us. We're testimony to the fact that there has been some improvement, but structurally, institutionally, not so much.
Candy, do you recognize any similarities between 1968 for the late 1960s and current times? And if so, what are those similarities that you may recognize?
Well, yes, I do. I do see some of that kind of come together, but on the same token, you know, I guess what we're finding out that where we make progress and we're saying, oh man, sure glad to see these people in office now, and there's people doing, you know, in the political world and how things are being there. We got black mayors, we got black police chiefs and doctors and what. All that's good, but then for every one guy that gets through, there's seems like 5 or 6 that fall by the wayside. And you pick up the paper and you see some of these people that could be scholars. Boy, you look over and you flip the page and they're getting 30 years in prison. So a lot is good, but a lot is, is bad. So you ask yourself why. Because then you get somebody on TV telling you, well, we had a very good year. We done hired 2,000 jobs, 250,000 jobs that were available this year and all that. And then, but you still go out there in the public and you see people standing there doing nothing. Able-bodied people that's not working. I don't know why, but they're not working. So they in food lines. I worked in the soup line myself. I worked there, and volunteered. I helped raise money for them and do all that. And so you get kind of an inside look, and you're saying, man, when they come through the line, you look, oh man, I didn't know that guy was hungry. You just don't know until you get involved and you see these things. And every time you sit around and you think, boy, everybody got a chick in every pot, and, you know, and a car, 2 or 3 cars in the driveway, you think things are good. But on the flip side, they might not be so good for everybody. And it, you know, I'm sure that's gonna be always be, that's gonna be somebody falling through the wayside. But what I do know, and I, from experience and all these times that I've been out here paying attention to life in general, is that it's just too many of us live from paycheck to paycheck. I mean, we can't afford, the average person out here cannot afford to miss 1 or 2 paychecks. And this kind of things, I thought we had passed that. And it seemed to be still there. So, I would think, that's the simulation that I have between my mother doing 2 jobs in the 30s and 40s, working in the kitchen and then going and doing domestic work at night or in the mornings. You know, getting on a bus, trying to, you know, help put food on the table. But sometimes, even especially when my dad was off in the military. In the military, they wasn't doing nothing for you back there. I don't know, you get allotment and stuff, but I guess it was pretty rough. But to get up there, and I understood that. So when I was at a young age, 13, 14 years old, I started realizing, you know, I need to get out there and help. So I do things, especially in the summer. I try to go over and wash. That's when they didn't have no dishwasher. You wash dishes in the restaurants. You did shine shoes. You did all kinds of things. Bought my school clothes. Did things. So my parents didn't have to worry about that come school time. What you gonna wear? And you know, one of the saddest things that I remember is that when one of my graduations coming up, my mother said, "You need to talk to your dad. You need a suit." And I'm saying, but you know, I felt like, well, I'm a man too, and of course I wasn't, but I felt like it was hard for me to go in there and ask him, "You need to buy me a suit," because you know, I know what he was going through. I knew he probably didn't even have anything, but he'd find a way. But I felt like I needed to do something for myself too. So that's what I did. You know, I get out there and I got me a suit. And so you know, these are things that I think about that, and I see my kids when a lot of times when they be scuffling. I said, the only reason why I don't help you is because I can't. In fact, as long as I can help you, I'm going to help you. But you got to realize life ain't that simple. You just don't come here and say, "Dad, I need this," and it happens. Well, Dad might be having a hard time too. He might not have nothing. So life is pretty much still the same when you get down to it. You know. No matter how much things change, certain things remain the same. And we still going living from paycheck to paycheck, doing the best we can with our families and friends.
Izona, same question to you. Do you recognize any similarities between 1968, late 1960s, and today? And if so,
No, for me. But the biggest difference, I kind of live in a bubble, so my life right now. And so I actually had to ask people, but the biggest thing that I see that's the same between 68 and 2018, and now we're in 2019, is the anger. There's just still so much anger. And to me, at 68, we had a lot of angry black people, and in 2018, there were a lot of angry white people. That was one of the things that really jumped out at me. And I was asking some people about it, so with the protests, so you see all the protests that we had in '68, and then you see all the protests in 2018, probably beginning about 2016. So similarities, and it's very similar to what Candy said. You know, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I haven't really seen that growth in some ways, but then seen a lot of decline in other ways. Even when it comes to ethics, morality, empathy, just so many things have changed in that sense. So similarities and yet differences, and yet it's still pretty much the same.
All right, well, thank you, panelists, for answering that question. I'm going to get to my last question, and then I want to make sure we have some time for audience questions as well, too. So this is going to be the last question I ask, and then we'll open it up to the floor as well. So I asked this question at a prior panel that we did with folks present in the community in 1968, and I figured I would ask it to our panelists today as well, too. So prior to coming to the museum, I was a high school history teacher, and when trying to bring historical content to life, I dreamed of having the opportunity to bring figures from history in to discuss their experiences firsthand, to bring these historical figures that we talk so much about in classrooms actually into the classroom would be awesome, in my opinion. You know, I thought it would be great when I was teaching world history. Wouldn't it be great if we could hear from the many individuals who helped put together the pyramids in ancient Egypt, and they could discuss what that work was like? Or would it be awesome to speak with our founding fathers and those present at that time to discuss what it was like to birth a nation, to bring a nation together, or to ask women, you know, just about 100 years ago, what they were feeling right after they cast a ballot to vote for the very first time. And I think we are presented with an awesome opportunity today because we have some awesome figures from history joining us here. And I would love to hear an answer to a question that I would ask all of those folks that I just mentioned, and I'll ask it to our panelists today. So I believe that the late 1960s is such an influential and crucial year in, you know, not just United States history, but world history in general. And I would like to know from our panelists, what do you hope the world and our community understands about this era in history? Looking back roughly 50 years ago at this particular time, what do you hope the world and our community understands about this era in history? That's my question. And then we'll start with Candy this time, and then we'll work our way in. So what do you hope the world and our community understands about this era in history, the late 1960s?
Well, I would hope that everybody would understand what a wonderful country we have, despite all the differences and the hate that we sometimes go through. Because, you know, TV and general, the overall picture, you look on TV, you can be in Africa one minute and in Paris the next minute, and they're showing everything. You know, people out the street protesting, throwing smoke bombs. So that's one of the things that you never want to forget, is that this is a wonderful country. No matter what they got faults. They're not perfect. It's not it. But I would say, when you think back, and I can't think of a year in my lifetime that when things got bad, I mean really bad for the country, people have a way of coming together. Seems like to me when they don't really understand each other until something bad happens. When the Trade Center got, there was no people standing around there like, yeah. That hurt everybody. It's when you went through hurricanes and tornadoes and people get homes and city towns get wiped out. People come from miles around to help. That's America. That's what people do And they didn't, you know, when that happens, they didn't care about who was black and who was yellow or orange, it was people hurting, it was home. So these are the things that I see, and I don't try to forget. We have a tendency as people to take a tragedy and do this, and then we move on to the next one, you know, and forget all about the other one. Yes, it was tragedies back in the day when Martin Luther King put down and so the Kennedys and all that, and people didn't understand that. But when God's tragedy happens, which is something we can't do nothing about, like hurricanes and tornadoes and whatever, we still don't have time to sit around and procrastinate about why we should we help them or should we not. Or you got babies that are hungry, you don't say, well, that's some black babies or that's white babies or Jewish babies or whatever. They're babies, so you take care of them. So that's the difference between me and I think that time and next time coming up until where we at now is that this is America. We do some things right. That's for sure. I'm proud to be one of them.
All right, thank you, Ken. Izona, what do you hope the world and our community understands about the late 1960s?
Well, I think that, when I think about the late 1960s, I think about, the protests, the marches, and we were all about trying to get laws changed. But even changing laws, you can't change hearts.
No.
So I think that, we were so busy trying to legislate all of these laws, and we somehow thought by changing this that we would somehow change people. And so I think that after 50 years, when you look at things, you look at, segregation is in some ways very similar, if not worse. There's a lot of social segregation, if nothing else. The more you try to integrate, it seems like the more people want to separate. So I think that what I've learned over the last 50 years is that you can't force people to do anything, and that's kind of what we were trying to do in '68, and we've come full circle here in 2018, 2019, and people have just decided that they're just showing their true colors, and if this is not what they're going to do, they don't do it. So I think the biggest thing is that you have to change hearts, because changing laws does not seem to make that much of a difference. And I think I kind of put that graphic up there on the board because I kind of show my reality right now and, the people that I associate with. And I think living in that bubble, because I was trying to reflect back and I couldn't even think of a single white friend that I have from college, which is really, really strange. And I said, I wonder if other people reflected back on that. Even the time that I spent here in Project 500, it was still just a lot of social isolation, segregation. And so after 50 years, I just think we've kind of come full circle. And it's still similar, if not worse, in some ways, because people have been so disappointed by the dreams versus the reality.
Thank you, Izona. Stan, what do you hope the world and our community understands about this era in history, the late 1960s?
50 years ago, and we've heard all of us reflect on cultural revolutions, political revolutions, social revolutions, sexual revolutions. While there was rage then and anger now, one rage that we haven't discussed, but we certainly should, is that of women at this Me Too movement moment. The head of the Me Too movement is Tarana Burke, an African-American woman. And I mention that because just 6 days ago, 5 days ago, at the State of the Union message, the president was boasting about the new jobs and how there were new people in jobs that had never been there before. And all of a sudden, 40 women dressed in white, celebrating the 100th anniversary when women were given the right to vote, new congresswomen who ran for office successfully and were elected, stood up in resistance, protest, and pride. And the president said, well, I didn't invite you to do that, but it's okay. And it was kind of funny, but it was also poignant. And I mention this because as a guy, there are certain privileges I have that women and girls do not. As a person of color, there are some privileges that I don't have as much access to. But I feel that I have a social and ethical responsibility at this Me Too movement moment to reflect on the fact that women are treated as fringe elements when demographically they are the majority. And I'm hoping that people will remember that, is sort of my point.
All right. Well, on behalf of us here at the museum, I thank you for answering that question as well as all the questions that I've posed and for coming out here. It's not easy to come up here, and share these experiences. It takes guts, and I truly appreciate that. And as I mentioned before, I mean, this is an awesome opportunity to be able to speak with individuals present during a time that was so influential in our country's history, and I really appreciate that. And I would hope that the audience would join me in giving them a round. All right, so with that, we will take questions from the audience. Feel free to ask all panelists the same question, or if you have a particular pointed question to one or two particular panelists, let us know. But we'll take some questions from the audience at this time.
This is probably more Izona Candy, but Stan, you mentioned what you were doing when Dr. King was killed and your reaction to that. What do you guys remember in terms of your own reaction, but also your community's reaction and what happened?
Well, actually, mine was very similar to Stan's, because our high schools were very, very close to one another. And of course, Dr. King was killed on a Thursday evening, so we kind of all heard about it at home, and we had a little time to process it. But the high school in Chicago organized walkouts the next day. And then, of course, you had the whole weekend where you were hearing about it and seeing the images about it. And when I described 1968 as feeling like a nervous breakdown kind of time, that's really almost what I felt like. I mean, they assassinated him, because prior to that, the only assassinations that I had really taken note of course, Lincoln, because of what he did for slaves. And then John F. Kennedy, that was etched in my mind very, very well, because I was also in school, and I remember the impact, because that happened over lunch, and just everybody being around the television set. And then this next big one with Dr. King, and it seems like Black people had rested their hope so much in Dr. King. So to me, that's kind of what I felt like. But even in my graphic, I mentioned it was the worst of times, it was the best of times, because after that, it seems like there were so many more opportunities that were opened up for Blacks, no doubt due to white guilt, or, along with other things. But I do believe white guilt was a big part of what happened after that.
Well, I think when I was right here in Champaign, and the community, matter of fact, I think I was working at a Labra furniture store, and I really didn't know what was going on. On my lunch hour, I went home, and I thought my wife and her friends and all, they were sitting there crying and going through all kinds of, I'm like, what in the world's going on? And of course, Martin Luther King, I just freaked out on that. But The other thing that I remember is that the churches were very instrumental in the neighborhood. They worked real good at it, and people went to church, you know, and, well, you know, that's the thing to do. You know, you cried, but you just have to go somewhere where you can be together. And that's what I keep talking about. People have to come together when in crisis. And you know, you don't have to be alone when you go through this. So, and you don't have to be angry, but you are going to be angry, but you got to be at a point where you got to be strong, because that's what he was preaching. You know, he wasn't preaching violence. So I'm saying that we thought the right thing to do would be a church, and be in a, you know, like in a community or community build and spread our feelings, cry, be angry, whatever it was. Some of them were angry, some of them, you know, but it's all we share all that together. So it was a time that, another time where I felt like people come together. And what we have to understand is, in the Martin Luther King movement, we weren't the only ones that was in that movement. Black people weren't the only ones in that movement. You should never forget that. All walks of life people. There are people from out of this country that were involved in that. Of all colors, all races, and whatever. These people put their effort in, they got whooped and thrown in jail just like our people did. So when Martin Luther King was killed, they messed up a dream not only for blacks, they messed up a dream for this country. That's what we was there for. So, and you know, you don't expect everybody to understand that, but that's the way it was. So that's the way I feel about it. It was a hard time. But I think we got stronger for it. I really do.
Thank you. More questions? Yes.
Could you provide some more information about what Project 500 is? I'm not super familiar with it.
I'll give you this. But in bold strokes, Terry Townsend from Champaign, along with other the black leaders, as well as some white administrators, had meetings in the mid-'60s, and certainly most definitely after the assassination of Dr. King, to accelerate the idea of bringing a large group of students of color, Black and Latinx students, to state schools, this state school. It created a movement that wasn't just University of Illinois, it happened with all of the state schools, but University of Illinois was the very first to do it in such a big way. So that's why this 50th anniversary of Project 500 is symbolically huge, certainly for our community here, but it's huge nationally. And the fact that we played a little part in it is, you know, it makes us feel good that we had a little part of being more or less an enlightened witness to a historic moment.